Hello. Today I'm going to tell you about the 2009 biographical drama called Invictus. February 11, 1990 becomes a significant day for all residents of South Africa. A popular political figure, Nelson Mandela, also known as Madiba, is released from the prison located on Robben Island after 27 years of incarceration. As the undisputed leader of the African National Congress, fighting for civil rights and the abolition of racial segregation, he participates in a negotiation process to abolish apartheid over the next 4 years, resulting in the first national elections. In May 1994, Mandela officially takes office as President of South Africa. The new position does not change the hero's old habits. He still takes an early walk to maintain his health, but now he has 2 security officers accompanying him. The cautious bodyguards see danger in any passing car and even in the newspaper deliveryman, but Mandela does not blame them. Many people in the country want him dead. Despite Madiba's resounding success, many media, as well as Afrikaners, descendants of European settlers, doubt that he can manage an entire country. Mandela feels this doubt when he comes to the president's office on his first day of governance. Some officials pack up, vacate offices, and leave their jobs, as they are not sure the new government will approve their candidacies for held positions. And Nelson gathers colleagues in his office for an impromptu conference, stating that he intends to provide fair treatment to the remaining colleagues, regardless of skin color and the language they speak. Mandela's head of security, Jason Tshabalala, approaches the president with a request regarding the composition of his team. He wants to have more bodyguards at his disposal to ensure reliable protection of the head of state, understanding that it's hard to accomplish with a group consisting of 4 people. Jason is shocked by Nelson's response. He sends for Tshabalala's assistance a quartet of former Special Department members, Afrikaners led by Etienne Fader. The man bursts into the president's office to dispute his decision, but Madiba gently explains to the subordinate the new political course chosen by his compatriots: reconciliation and forgiveness. Gritting his teeth, Jason returns to the office to try to resolve disagreements and quell the conflict arising from deeply rooted racial problems. Understanding that he has no other option but to work together with the newcomers, Tshabalala tells his colleagues that during their joint activities with the law enforcement officers, they will be carefully monitoring the latter. When Tshabalala receives the schedule of events the president is to attend in the coming month, he tenses up. It's all about the rugby match between England and the Springboks. More specifically, it's about the large crowd of fans not supportive of the newly elected president. The D-Day is coming. Mandela enters the stadium and seems not to notice the disapproving boos coming from the stands. He calmly heads to the middle of the field to greet the English, as well as Springboks captain Francois Pienaar and his team, all of whom are Afrikaners. Apart from winger Chester Williams, Lelokanya's among supporters of apartheid and is gaining momentum and volume, but Mandela deliberately goes beyond the barrier to exchange a few words with the people who voted for him. But Jason barely manages to get the president off the stands, reminding him that it's time to start the match. As the South African team increases an already large gap with the English, playing poorly despite the Rugby World Cup being just a year away, Nelson shifts his attention to the fans. He sees the irony in this situation. The Afrikaners are cheering for South Africa's team, while the indigenous people are principled in their support for England. It was the same on Robben Island during Mandela's imprisonment. One of the president's subordinates brings news that the National Sports Committee is disappointed with the Springboks' performance and intends to strip the team of its green and gold colors and logo, believing that its members are disgracing the country. The South African rugby players lose the match with a devastating score of 13-32. The Sports Committee's management puts forward a resolution to cancel the Springboks, after which everyone present unanimously decides to abolish the union, as the color, emblem, and even the name of the team are associated with the grim era of apartheid in the country's consciousness. Meanwhile, the president is forced to take into account and use all available means to bring about civil peace. He comes to the conclusion that the Springboks and the upcoming World Cup could be excellent tools for uniting hostile segments of the population. Madiba decides to risk reputation points and personally visits the committee members in hopes of changing their minds. He tells those gathered that he watched Afrikaner guards in prison for nearly 3 decades and got to know the enemy well enough to start fighting against them and win upon his release. The president states that now, when the defeated adversaries live side by side with the indigenous population, the latter must demonstrate mercy and magnanimity and forget about petty revenge, keeping the former colors and emblem of the rugby team. Despite the fact that the leader's passionate speech does not resonate in the hearts of many committee members, by the time Nelson leaves, he manages to garner 12 votes supporting his point of view. The president sees progress in this, as this number is enough to keep the name Springboks. Madiba's faithful assistant, Brenda Mazibuko, disagrees with the boss. She would prefer Mandela to be involved in more important matters than rugby, and this view is shared by other members of the administration. Nevertheless, Madiba believes that the disappearance of the team will exacerbate the hostility between the disagreeing parties, so he decides to focus on restoring the Springboks' former glory. While the South African rugby players taste the bitterness of defeat again, Madiba embarks on visits to several countries to secure partners and convince them to invest in South Africa's economy. Upon returning, the president learns that the Springboks coach has been fired and decides it's time to act. On the same day, Francois receives an invitation for tea from Madiba. An Afrikaner from the security service, Henrik, assures the nervous rugby player that Mandela is a sensitive and attentive leader who always has an ace up his sleeve. Then he asks Francois about the prospects regarding the World Cup, despite the captain's promise to do everything in their power to win the cup. The bodyguard decides that the South Africans have absolutely no chance, which he reports to his colleagues. Meanwhile, in his office, Mandela converses with Francois about the latter's inspiration and tries to understand what motivates the athlete to continue playing while at the limits of his capabilities. Receiving a satisfying answer, Nelson tells about a Victorian-era poem that helped him keep his spirits up during his imprisonment. At the end of the conversation, Mandela hints that a victory for the South African team in the championship will have enormous significance both for the country as a whole and for the disparate clans that make it up. Many, including Nelson's daughter Zindi, disapprove of the duo's meeting. She criticizes her peacemaker father for his soft policy, focusing on her own grievances and emotions and not trying to understand Madiba's motives, thereby upsetting him. Later, the president's advisor confirms the head of state's theory about the magnitude of the championship, implying that Mandela's presence at the closing ceremony could be a good opportunity to demonstrate important statements. The captain of the Springboks takes the president's words seriously, and he does not allow either himself or the players to leave the field and end the training earlier than required. Soon, Mandela orders public demonstrations of the rugby players and local resident training as part of a PR campaign, and this upsets some athletes. Francois reminds his team that they are now not just players, but symbols of hope and change, so changes will become an integral part of their lives. Under the watchful eyes of cameras, the Springboks visit the most remote village in the country, where devastation and poverty reign, to train the children. At first, Chester is the only one surrounded by kids from the township, but soon the entire team is helping the new generation learn the basics of rugby and instilling in them a sense of national pride, regardless of their origins. Meanwhile, Mandela happily watches as his plan to rescue the nations begins to unfold. A week before the championship, Francois gives his team copies of the South African national anthem, saying that everyone must learn them and sing as is customary. Most of the team crumples their sheets in protest, and the captain gives up, saying that the athletes can do this voluntarily, after which he adds that many could use such support on the field. Soon, Mandela, who had carefully studied the team composition in advance, flies in by helicopter right to the training field and completely stuns the rugby players by addressing them by their names and wishing each of them luck. The president also learns that Chester has injured his knee and will likely miss most of the championship. Mandela's visit motivates the players to finally appreciate the importance of their sporting mission as a collective national task. The championship opens with a game between Australia and South Africa, which ends in favor of the latter and brings unprecedented joy to the stands and in people's hearts. But the morning after celebrating the Springboks' victory, the team goes for a jog that slowly turns into an unexpected trip to Robben Island, where Mandela was held. Standing inside the former president's cell, Francois is horrified to see how tiny and depressing it is. Looking out at the prison yard that Nelson had seen for 27 years, the captain recalls the lines of the poem Invictus, or Unconquered, which the president had given him before the championship. In the evening, Mandela is found unconscious near his house. While the doctor prescribes complete bed rest to maintain Nelson's energy, his assistant Mary informs him about the Springboks' progress in the tournament. But first, the South African team beats Samoa, and then they advance to the semifinals, beating the French team. The players, coaches, and Mandela himself learn about New Zealand's victory over England and review the match in anticipation of a duel between the two strongest teams at that time. The president realizes he chose the right strategy when he sees his united bodyguards playing rugby. On the day of the final match, the Springboks go on their traditional morning jog, and this time both Afrikaners and indigenous people join them, cheering the athletes on. Meanwhile, the security service is nervous, knowing that during the competition, Mandela will be the most vulnerable since taking office. Additional snipers take up positions on neighboring rooftops, while the rest of the security is deployed inside the stadium. Jason tenses up when he sees a rapidly descending plane and doesn't have time to come up with a contingency plan for the president in case of an attack. Fortunately, the aircraft just flies over the stadium, displaying the message "Good luck, Springboks," making the crowd cheer enthusiastically. 62,000 fans gather at the stadium to watch the final confrontation between New Zealand's All Blacks and South Africa's Springboks, while 1 billion people follow the confrontation on radio and TV. Chester's injury has finally healed, and he is cleared to play. Mandela walks onto the field before the match in a Springboks cap and an exact replica of Pienaar's number 6 jersey to wish the players good luck, after which all of Johannesburg falls silent as tens of thousands of voices sing the South African national anthem in unison. The starting whistle sounds, and it's not long before the New Zealanders take the lead. Francois encourages his team, forcing them to even the score, and then take the lead. At the end of the halves, the opponents score 9 points each, forcing the referee to assign extra time. The final 7 minutes of the match decide the outcome, and South Africa wins with a score of 15-12. Mandela and Pienaar meet on the field to celebrate the incredible and unexpected victory, and the president hands the captain the Webb Ellis Cup, confirming the Springboks as the Rugby World Champions. Then the president's car drives onto the crowded streets, and Madiba watches as his united country celebrates the victory together, while simultaneously recalling the lines of the Unconquered poem. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to leave your impressions about the movie. Goodbye.